My good friend and one of the smartest white men on this side of heaven is here. And he's down in Sweet Home, Alabama, I hear, my hometown. Bill Lockwood. He is talk radio boldest voice on patriotism. Radio host at America Liberty with Bill Lockwood, author of Ezekiel, the Watchman of Israel. Bill, he's also a pastor, folks. Bill, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Jesse. Thank you for having me today. Good to be with you.
You too. For some reason, it's not set up right, Joy. He seemed down like.
Do I need to get up?
Yeah. So could somebody come and help with this? I can't do a show with Bill. I don't want Bill to look like he's sitting down in a hole. No, why you guys allow this to happen?
Good. He's fine.
Oh.
Come back.
He's fine.
So are you comfortable right now, Bill?
I'm great. Yeah, I'm very comfortable.
Okay, how about that white thing up over his
That's
head?
normal. That's always there.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, that's better, Bill.
Okay.
And so you're down in Alabama.
Yes, sir.
And celebrating Thanksgiving?
Yes, sir. You know, I'm with my brother and his wife, and they're real hospitable, and they near your hometown. So we're down here for Thanksgiving week. So we have a lot of family coming in. So we're look forward to it.
Right on. Well, say hello to the family, and I hope you guys have a really good gathering down there.
Oh, good. Thank you for that. Good weather.
Oh, it's hot down there today?
Well, I wouldn't say hot, but it's nice. It's nice weather.
All right. That's great, Bill. So, Bill, I want to talk to you about the Secret Service release of a report last week on student threat assessment. And according to what I read that you wrote, it's about this red flag law. Can you explain that to us?
Well, I'm glad you used that terminology. You know, I was thinking about it this morning. It's the same thing as the red flag laws in Colorado and other states, wherein neighbors might, what they say, red flag their neighbors if they think that there's some kind of threat. So we've turned our entire culture into a spy system. And what this is about, the director of the Secret Service, James Murray, has put out a paper in which he wants schools, that is government schools, to public schools, to have the teachers and administrators watch the students and profile them based upon various different factors, whether it be psychological or behavioral different problems. And so these profiles will supposedly red flag the kids that are in danger of committing acts of violence. And so what the Secret Service wants to be done is that the schools red flag them, then the government will be able to step in and remove the guns from the homes or see what kind of accessibility these kids have to guns in the home. So all it is, it's a spy system, it's a spy network set up that wherein our public schools are going to be used to spy on children to see which ones are in danger of doing these acts of violence. So that's basically what's going on. This is their recommendation, and they wanted it for a long time.
So if this teacher looks at a student and decide that the student is acting in a way that they don't think the student should be acting, they can then go and search the home. How would they think that a personality at school would have anything to do with a gun at home?
Well, you know, the Secret Service in their official paper, they say that it's not simply how a person acts. They want to know the person's socioeconomic background. They want to know whether their parents have been divorced, whether their parents have had family violence in the home, whether the child is in poverty, whether the child has had some kind of traumatic experience lately, the death of someone in the family. All of these experiences, and they call them adverse childhood experiences, so they call them ACEs, ACE, so they have an ACE score, adverse childhood experience score. And so this score is it's just kind of a running blurry game, but the teachers and administrators are looking at the ACEs of a child and making a determination whether that child scores highly on the ACE exam. That's their self-imposed exam, and whether the child scores one way or the other way. And that way the school might preempt any kind of violence that is done by stepping in or calling the authorities to step into the home.
That's
what they're proposing. Yeah. Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
why would, now that we normal people know that the public schools are out of control, and that there are government schools, and the people who are teaching, not all the teachers of course, but most of the teachers are teaching, they are perverted teachers. You have radical homosexuals and lesbians, you have transgender men dressing in dresses, all kind of weird things happening at school. Why would parents sacrifice their children to that, knowing that if something like this should happen, that these teachers may find out that your kids' parents are conservatives or vote for President Trump? They could falsely accuse the kid and go to your house and take your gun because they don't have any. Teachers don't have any values anymore.
You know what? We've been doing this for a long time anyway. The teachers have been involved in recommending children to have medication for behavioral problems and ADHD and ADD. And so teachers are those who are, they've been red flagging children for a long time on those kind of behavioral problems, which really root to family problems, and primarily, Jesse, it's lack of fathers in the home and lack of Christian upbringing with children. So what's happened is the government has destroyed the home, and they have done so by becoming the father to many children, particularly minority children, black children, Hispanic children. And so they become the daddy in the home. Now the government's not a good daddy, so the children are out of control. Now at school, they're going to be red flagging the children that are out of control. So they have been doing it for a long time. So they either put them on medication, and now the same thing is going to take place where they red flag the children for possible violence or what they think profiles violence. And so it's just a spy system that the government schools have set up.
So are they able to get away with it because these women who are having children out of wedlock don't have time for their kids, so they just send them off to school? So the schools are aware that the parents don't care. They're not paying attention. The father's nowhere around. That's why they're able to do all this, because I can't see a husband and a wife or a father and mother sending their children to a public school today. It's too risky in so many ways.
Oh, you know what? With the sex education that goes on in the younger age brackets, and the transgenderism that they have, in California, they have transgenders coming into first and second graders and giving them storybook hours. The whole thing, and plus they have simply the indoctrination that is so solidly based in so many of the schools, even in conservative states. So they have indoctrination. So you know what? They're just government schools, is what they are. And yeah, that's right. People need to have their children in public schools, private schools, or homeschooled, and I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a family that respects their parents and respects God, then that has to be the way you go. Because in the public school system, it is and the hands are tied of the public school teachers. They can't do anything, and you have to kind of be involved and get in the mainstream with this. And so it's a serious situation, really.
So do you blame the schools or you blame the parents?
Well, you know what? I don't know exactly who to blame all the way straightforward, but I'll say this, that, the American people generally have fallen asleep at the wheel, and we have been falling asleep for the last 75 years at least. FDR stepped in and became the father for many children through the welfare system, and particularly Lyndon Johnson. Yeah. And you know how that happened in the black community. So right now, I guess 3 out of 4 children that are in the black community are fatherless in the home. And so that means the government's the father. And so now the black communities are out of control. And so at the same time, so that they have laws such as in Dallas, Texas, where they say, you know what, if we have a small store that has $1,000 worth of merchandise stolen, then that's going to be a minor infraction. It's a misdemeanor. We're not even going to prosecute at that one because it's so out of control. Now we're changing the rules, how we even play in society, how we play with one another. And it's really a serious situation. So the schools are actually a part of this. So it's just an ongoing problem. I think the root problem, though, is that we lack God, we lack respect for God, and the solidarity of the family, and that's what's happening.
Is it true that the sexual liberation is a Marxist idea?
I believe it is. You know what? I think Marxism number one, Marxism has said from the very beginning that they wanted to dissolve the family. The family unit was, and that's the way they played it in Soviet Union. They dissolved the families. They wanted to dissolve the family. The family is the basic unit of society. You know, Jesse, when Alexis de Tocqueville came over here in America in the 1830s, the thing that shocked him the most was the fact that our Americans were all being raised in families that had mom, dad, and the kids, and that they had a solid unit. And it was so shocking to him because in Europe that had already been, for the most part, dissolved in many areas. And he was just really not just pleasantly surprised, but he was shocked, actually. And he wrote about it in Democracy in America. Not only that, but the churches. I mean, the churches were filled, and the pulpits, he said, as he put it, were aflame with righteousness. So the family unit is so important to a Christian upbringing. And if we can dissolve the family, so Karl Marx indeed said, yes, we need to deteriorate the family. And the way to deteriorate the family is for the government to step into the role of it. And that's exactly what's happened in America. The government now becomes the father, and the children are out of control.
The Hill released a poll showing 2/3 of Republicans support red flag laws. Is that true? And if it is true, are you surprised by it?
I'm not surprised. I don't know if it's true. I haven't read that particular article. You know what? I'll tell you what. The majority of Americans. This was put out by the Kelly Shackelford's organization. I've forgotten the name of it offhand. I think it's Freedom First. At any rate, Kelly Shackelford and his organization put out this the fact that, or wrote an article regarding a recent poll that was taken in which 51% of Americans, 51%, now favor rewriting the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship, because hate speech now supposedly must be legislated against. And of course, hate is in the eye of the beholder, just as beauty is. So Americans are, of course, being absolutely brainwashed to rewrite the First Amendment, as well as these other things. So I'm not surprised at all if that be true. But nevertheless, it's a frightening situation. Many Americans are in serious trouble in their thinking capacity.
The interesting thing about people who are calling it hate speech, they have the freedom to call it hate speech, but you don't have the freedom to disagree with them.
Yeah, right.
I don't understand that.
Well, it's not something to be understood. It's something simply to be goose step to. You're not to understand it. You're just to obey, not to ask questions.
Right.
That's what they want you to do. And so the same thing with red flag laws, which really puts the onus of proof on someone who's accused. It turns our judicial system and the very concept of right and wrong on its head, where a person who has been accused of a crime or accused of being guilty of something is really supposed to be presumed to be innocent until proven. We have to have the proof of it, but it turns that thing on its head when we have red flag laws in any way whatsoever. But this is what happens when we have a society that's out of control because they lack God in their lives. They do not follow Jesus Christ, and they have broken homes and broken families, and they're put people out of control. Now the government saying, we're going to have red flag laws. We're going to turn the judicial system on its head, and it's a sad situation.
That guy, Nicholas Cruz, he was the Portland shooting, school shooter, and he was a part of a Promise program. Can you explain to those who might not be aware of the Promise program, and how did that contribute to the shooting?
You know what, Jesse? That's a great question. The Promise program, just as the JDAI program, Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, which is really fostered by such organizations as the Annie E. Casey Foundation, as well as others, which basically tells us that the bottom line is that we have in juvenile detention centers, we have too many minorities, too many people of color that are being incarcerated in the adult system, and too many people of color in the judicial system at juvenile detention. So what we need to do, we need to level out that those percentages, because a higher percentage of blacks or higher percentages of Hispanics incarcerated in the youth programs means only one thing to the liberal, and that means we have overt racism, and racism drives us. And they say that's a proof of it. So what we need to do is we need to level that out. Consequently, instead of arresting children, such as, there's a lot of stories about children who have simply drawn pictures of guns in school, and they are taken to juvenile detention, or they're put into ISS, in school suspension. They'll put them in separate classrooms because they draw a picture of a gun in school. Just a child, maybe third grade. But here we have a high school teenager who had threatened people. He had access to firearms. It was warned to the authorities on a number of occasions, but he was not arrested. He was not put in juvenile detention because his name was Cruz. He had a Hispanic name, and we've already gone. The foregone conclusion is we have too many Hispanics and too many blacks in juvenile detention centers, and we've got to do something different because that shows we're racism. So they are loath to arrest minorities in those kind of situations. And Broward County, Florida, was one of the pilot programs of this organization, or of the Promise program. It was one of the pilot counties in America. Parkland, Florida, is in Broward County. So it was one of their showcases, just as Chicago, Illinois is. Cook County, Illinois is exactly the same way. And so that's what's happening in these different localities. So Nicholas Cruz should have been already in juvenile detention,
Right.
But he was not, because his name was Cruz. So now he shoots up the place. So now we're coming back with, well, we've got to do something different. We've got to red flag the people who are law-abiding citizens.
And that's the same down in Florida. There was the sheriff was called Scott Israel, right?
That's correct.
And
right.
he was helping. Was he helping to promote this program, the Promise program?
Well, he was. They had signed on to it. So these programs, of course, they offer money. If they don't offer money, they offer great community benefits to these programs, such as they will offer, say, well, you know what, if you do this, you'll have more economic benefit in a society, in a community, because what's going to happen is you'll have less people incarcerated, more people out in the workforce. And so, but because of political correctness, basically, these different sheriff's offices sign on to it, or because perhaps they're given government money, they sign on to the program because they all want money. So the government's passing out the money or passing out the benefits. And so Broward County and Sheriff Israel indeed signed on, and they were a pilot program for it. So they were not going to arrest a Cruz, not as readily as they would if it had been me, or Lockwood.
Right. I noticed that, and maybe you can help me with this, that whenever anyone wanted to bring on destruction in America, they always use the blacks to help get it done. For example, they say blacks and Mexicans. Mexicans ain't got nothing to do with blacks, but they add the Mexicans to the black. Or the lesbians, they say lesbians and blacks. Or they say homosexuals and black, or black and brown, or whatever they say, right? Whenever they want to kill more babies in the womb, they say blacks and baby killers, whatever they say.
Right.
And blacks go along with it. So
Right.
I mentioned in my office yesterday that I believe that the only purpose that, not all, but most, blacks were created was for destruction. Because I can't think of one thing in the last 70 years that majority of black people have done and it was good, or majority of black people have gone against evil. I can't think of anything. So I'm wondering, because Irma's tried to tell me I'm wrong about that, were blacks created for destruction?
Well, I mean, I don't. You mean as far as created by in the families, or what do you mean, created by God? Or I don't know about created. I do.
It seemed as though they were created for destruction, because in the good old days when white people were in control of the country, black people were, because of slavery and Jim Crow and all that, there were a sense, they were noble people, but they were living in a society that was being built by white people and there were certain things that even the radical blacks were not allowed to do. But since white people are now under attack, they can't speak up, they can't disagree on anything, and black people have gone out of control completely. It's like they have nothing to control them for. Inside of me, I love what's right, and the principles are living through me in my heart. So that controlled me. But I noticed that with most black people, they don't live by those principles, so they're out of control. And all they do now is destroy, and anyone that want to destroy the ideas and principle of God, they bring blacks in to do it, and the blacks are really happy to do it. For example, Bill, I read a report yesterday that men are not signing up anymore to become police officers. It's down by 50%. And when you show what happened, it's the blacks who caused that to happen by going after the cops and calling them cop, whatever they call them. It wasn't true, but they called them that. But it was the blacks who brought that down. It's like everything that's good, blacks are being used, and blacks seem to be happy to be used for destruction.
Well, this goes back once again, in my view, to Marxism, which basically is an anti-God position, which appeals to the race of a person or skin color of a person as the cause of problems in America. So, you know what? When the Vladimir Lenins and Karl Marxes of the world in history looked at America, they said from the very beginning that we already have a natural wedge. How are we going to create chaos in America? How are we going to do it? And because they had to create chaos in the Soviet Union, that's what they did. They created chaos. So they created chaos between the ruling class and those who were under them. We don't have really a ruling class in America, but we do have another natural wedge. And the natural wedge is race, because we have a black population and now a very large Hispanic population. So the appeal is made to those as that they are just the same as they did in the Soviet Union, that those people were trodden upon by the elites and the rulers, and we're going to cause the workers to rise up. So that's exactly what they've done. They've used and they've driven that wedge very deeply, and they've appealed to people's skin color and appealed to their race as being the problem in America. The reason that blacks are down is because of the white man. And so when you preach that from the time that you're very, very small, then that's all you believe. But the true problem is sin in the heart of man. And we're not going to solve anything, of course, until we get to the real root problem, sin. And it's individual, and it has nothing to do with one's race or anything like that. But we're just skirting around on the edges. But it's basically setting up a revolution in America on the basis of race and skin color.
But majority of black people read the Bible and they go to church. How come? And they pretend to be Christians. Why is it they can't, just from reading the Bible and going to church, why can't they see that they're being used for destruction? I mean, that alone should be. In New York, they're talking about letting out 900 inmates, right? People of color. How come the blacks can't see, just from reading the Bible, this is wrong, I'm not going along with it?
Well, that's a good question. But, it just reminds me of what happened in Germany in pre-Hitler days. But during Hitler's time, the churches continued to preach, the preachers continued to preach, the people continued to assemble, even though while they were singing songs in the church building, the trains were running by carrying Jews to the different death camps. And they were just singing their songs as the trains were already rolling. And that's exactly what's happening in America. We're not getting down to the root problem. We're just fooling ourselves to think that, and the churches they've become part of the problem in many areas. The churches and the preachers themselves have become part of the problem. They're preaching racial-based type of material. They're preaching different liberation theology, for example. Liberation theology is just a theological tool that is used. It's really not theological. It's a socialistic tool that has the cloak of theology on it, and they're preaching liberation theology in these different churches in a lot of places. I've heard some of this back in 40 years ago. I mean, so they have perverted the gospel of Christ. They've perverted what we're about, what we should be doing. And a lot of churches are doing exactly that, and they're appealing to the skin color. Well, once again, they're appealing to the race.
Well, what I don't understand, and you are the smartest white man on this side of heaven.
That's not true.
Who is the smartest?
It's not me. I know that.
No. It's you, Bill. You so humble. Thank you, though. But listen, as an individual, you know that, right? Because you're a Christian, you see what's going on, and so you reject that. As an individual, I see that that's wrong, and I reject it. What's wrong with the rest of them, the blacks, that they can't see as individuals that that's wrong, and I'm not going along with? Why can't they see that? They used to see it when I was growing up. Why can't they see it and then call themselves Christian? They hate white people, and the Bible said don't hate, but yet they hate white people, and they praise Jesus all day long, run up and down this road. How come they can't say, well, you know what? At least my God in the Bible says this is wrong. I'm not going along with what someone else say.
Well, the most difficult thing for anybody to do, Jesse, is repent, because it's a direct challenge to the willpower of a man or a woman. It's a direct challenge. And what they have not done is they've not faced themselves as their own soul in the mirror and really come to repentance before God for this. But instead, they've listened to the siren song of a false gospel that has appealed to the racial division in America. They've talked about social justice, and that's exactly what they're preaching in the churches anymore, the social justice nonsense. All of it's Marxism. And, even 100 years ago, think about this, 100 years ago, the Methodist Church was a leader in this. They had different individuals that were involved in this, what was called then the social gospel. The social gospel was all about the rights of workers and getting out in the streets and joining the unions. And there are many people who've talked about this, and they eventually moved right into socialism, into communism through that avenue of being involved in the social gospel, which was taught by Walter Ruschenbosch, and that was basically that, we're going to change up the gospel in the sense that we're going to look at how we can level racial disparities in society, economic disparities, and all of that is now seen as the goal of what we're doing in the pulpit. That has nothing to do with it. That's not what the gospel of Jesus Christ is about. To change my economic situation, or to change where I live, or if I'm a slave, that I should stand up and then I should injure my master. That has nothing to do with the gospel of Christ. You don't read that in the New Testament at all. That's not part of it. The principles, I'll say, I've been quick to add this. I think the principles of Christ infused in a society eventually change a society for the good, eradicating things like slavery. But at the same time, you don't read in the New Testament where Paul says, you are slaves and you need to rise up and you need to get rid of slavery in America because that's the number one problem in America, or the number one problem in Greece, or the number one problem in Rome. No, there's nothing like that in the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel addresses the heart of a man, and it talks about sin, individual sin. And that's the problem. But we want to look at it differently. And we want to see it all different. So social gospel, the social justice, has been preached for over 100 years in America. It has taken the heart out of the churches and destroyed the messages that they preach.
I'm just amazed at what I see happening right now. I heard a black man represent another organization said on TV, on Fox News, that he had a husband, and that. And I had never heard a black man. I didn't think black men were, even if they felt that way, that they would say it out loud, right? If you're black, you just don't do certain things, right? But he said he had a husband, and the husband is white. He married, so-called married, but looked like Christian would know just from reading the Bible alone. I mean, just if you never read the Bible, right? You would know that's not true. You ain't got no husband. You're a male. If you got on a dress, you still a male in a dress. A little confused, but you're still a male. But the Christians and the Jews are afraid to denounce bad behavior like that?
You know what? We are all, I mean, American Christians generally are frequently falling into the same trap. Just think about what the Bible says about the woman's role in the church.
Right.
Paul says very plainly in 1 Corinthians 14 that she is to be silent in the church. She's not to have dominion or authority over a man, 1 Timothy chapter 2. But people come to the text of the 1 Corinthians 14 or 1 Timothy 2 and say, you know what? We've come to a different place in society, and that was all about the first century. And so now you have women who are preaching and women who are in leadership positions in the churches. And so if we're going to go along with that, if we can do that, then why can't we do the same thing regarding homosexual issues or any other issue?
Yeah.
We've come to the New Testament and we say, I like this, I don't like that, and we jettison what we don't like, and we just go along with a nice little message that we think is going to be pleasing to people. And so we've done that with all these issues. And the same thing regarding the women's issue, and the same thing regarding homosexuality. That's all first century Paul's material of his prejudices or the first century norm at the time, but that does not necessarily apply to us, and that's how they look at it.
And then I'll let you go, Bill. I know that white people founded America and created the greatest country on this side of heaven, and whites, for whatever reason, decided in the Constitution that wherever, that they're going to let other people come in, right? Non-white people come in. And these people come into, whether they were born here and been brainwashed or they were brought here illegally or however they got here, they come in and turn on the very people who created the greatest country on this side of heaven and welcome them into the country. And then when they come here, or they're born here now, they bring all their stuff from their country and make America look like their country. And yet white people who founded the country, this is their house, they are afraid to speak up about it. The men and the women. I'm blown away by that. And you say?
Well, you know what? That goes back to men such as the late Senator Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy almost single-handedly changed our entire immigration system. He continued to preach, and he had the same cues that the communists took, same cues on it, and that is regarding those who are coming into our country, primarily coming from European countries. And he basically said, well, that's because we're racist and we don't want people of color in this country. And so he continued to hammer that pulpit, and the conservatives have backed up for over 150, 200 years now. And so what happened was he single-handedly changed the immigration system. The reason that the founders set up that the primary people that would populate this nation came from European countries was not because of their skin color, was because they had ideas of government that were different than people in the continent of Africa or in South America who came from dictatorships. They had more free organizations of government, such as in England and other countries where they had, because this is where our roots go back to. That's why they wanted them to come this way. But Ted Kennedy almost single-handedly changed it in the 1960s. Added to that, the welfare system, which has been a huge magnet to bring people in here. And one thing Kennedy said, he says, this will not change the demographics of those who come into the country. He continued to lie to the nation on that, and everybody knew that that's exactly what would take place. And that's exactly what has occurred. So now we have a flood coming in from all different nations. And it's not about skin color, it's not about race, it's about the ideas of government and ideas of freedom and liberty that they lack when they come in. They are only accustomed to dictatorships, communism, and other such things as that, but they don't have ideas of God and country and family that really made America great.
So your mic went out for a minute. So you're saying that when they created America, and they decided that we wanted people from European countries to come into America because they had the same ideas about.
That's correct.
Had nothing to do with skin color, but the ideas. But then this Kennedy guy came along and he said, no, we're going to open it up to everybody. And
That's
you just
correct.
don't want them here because of skin color. What a mess.
That's right. That's right. But his idea, he said, it's not going to, the demographics are not going to change. It's not going to bring people in here who want dictatorships and communism and socialism. It's not going to do that. We're not going to open up the floodgates to African nations or South American nations. He said, that's not going to happen. Of course, all the time, everybody who have any common sense and could see through a barbed wire fence knew that that is exactly what would happen, and that is exactly what has occurred. So consequently, we have people flooding into this nation who have no sympathy with a constitutional Republican form of government. They have no sympathy with that. And that's what's happened to America. So he almost single-handedly, with, of course, the help of the liberal Democrats in Congress, and they've been running Congress for a long time, they changed the immigration system, and we have not been the same, and we're not going to be the same.
So what's going to happen to white people, because the people of color are taking over the government, local, state, and federal government? They're taking over the schools. And it's the white people who are under attack by these people and pushing them down, away. And white people are refusing to have babies. They are refusing to speak up. Will they end up in the same condition that the whites are in South Africa, where the lands are being taken, whites are being murdered and killed and whatever, and raped? And what's going to happen to the white people, since they are the ones who create the best society? They'll disappear. I don't understand what's going to happen to the white people.
You know, I don't know exactly, Jesse. That's in God's hands. But I'll say this, that it's the same thing going on in France, same thing going on in South Africa that you pointed out. Macron in France has already talked about, giving portions of France to the Muslims that have come there, because as right here in America, they have Sharia law. They want to have Sharia police right up in New York. They have their own Sharia police. They want to have their own communities. They're not assimilating. They're not going to assimilate. It's a different religion of a different color. It's a false religion following a false man, Muhammad, who claimed to be a prophet of God. He's no prophet at all. But
oh, man. Bill, your thing, Paul.
I think I'm back. Whoop.
You're back.
Okay.
So you were saying in Europe, they're giving the land and stuff over to the Muslims, and nothing no one can do about it.
Well, I mean, that's what one of the proposals is, because they have so many Muslims that have come in there, so they want to give that to them. So, but it's the same thing in South Africa. We got in there on what side did we get on? We got in on the communist side in South Africa, and now what's happening? It's just an upheaval. It's terror, and the people who have been in control of the country, the whites that were there, now they're being taken out and they're being murdered and their lands are being confiscated, even though that was, of course, promised it would not occur. So, I mean, I don't know what will happen, but anyway, that's what's happening.
Do white people know that they're being destroyed and that they're hated and these people are not playing around? Because I've noticed that even when the young white men and women try to speak up for themselves, right? Like, no, we're not going to put up, this is wrong. There are so-called people of color and other whites who call them Nazis and supremacists, and they go against their own white people, and these people try to stand up for themselves. Do white people know it doesn't matter if you're a liberal, conservative, Republican, Christian, or non-Christian, that the fact that you're white, you're not liked either?
I guess brainwashing really means brainwashing. And that's exactly what a lot that's happening to a lot of the college kids in colleges. They're being brainwashed to believe those things. And they just don't have no reasoning skills, no reasoning ability. And reason it just kind of goes off of them like water off a duck's back. So I don't know, but that's a good question.
Do you see what is happening as I see it?
Oh yeah, I absolutely. I see. There are a lot of young people in colleges, particularly college campuses, and I see that all the time.
There are these two different organizations of white people, young white people, who are at war with one another right now. To put it, I don't know how to put it, and on one side, the head of an organization says he's a Christian, right? And they allow these homosexuals and other lesbians and others to come into the conservative party and promote so-called conservative values, principles or whatever. But these radical homosexuals who are calling themselves conservatives are also promoting homosexuality and lesbians and all that, right? And then on the other side, these white Christians are saying, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. You can't promote homosexuality. That's what the Democratic Party is doing. And so I'm wondering from you, how is it that a man or woman who call themselves a Christian will allow homosexuals to come into the Conservative Party and publicly bring their lifestyle as though it's good, just for the vote?
Yeah, well, there may be many causes like that, but I tell you one thing: they're not moved by the Bible. They're not moved by God's word at all, and they're not convicted by God's word. They're not following God's word, and they're not Christians in the biblical sense. And you can't stand for sin at the same time call yourself a Christian and say, well, we're going to be standing for sin. We're going to be supporting sinful activity and sinful lifestyle.
So we've run out of time anyway. Tell the people your website, how to listen to your show, your podcast, and all that stuff.
All right, it's AmericanLibertyWithBillLockwood.com, AmericanLibertyWithBillLockwood.com. And it's not just me writing on there. A lot of good writers on there, such as yourself, Tom DeWeese, and many others. But that's the website. The radio show is exactly the same. It's out of Wichita Falls, News Talk 1290. It's Saturdays at 11 a.m., and it airs in Lubbock and Abilene, 5 o'clock Sunday afternoons. So it's AmericanLibertyWithBillLockwood.com, and American Liberty with Bill Lockwood is the name of the radio show as well. So I talk about all these issues also on the radio. So, yeah, thank you for that.
I really, really want people to listen to your radio show, read your writing, because you're so clear about all this stuff. And you know a lot about past history, why things happen, and blah, blah, blah. So I definitely want them to check you out. He speaks out again? All right, thank you, Bill.
Oh, there. Okay, thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
All right, thanks to you, Bill. Don't eat too much turkey.
Okay, I'll be try to keep it down.
All right, buddy. Thank you, Bill. Amazing.